And now remarks from New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg on urban transformation. He spoke earlier today at the World Bank here in Washington. And joining him were World Bank President and former Deputy Secretary of State Robert Zoellick. This is 40 Minutes.
Well, good morning. It's great to see so many here. It's not unexpected. We've got a wonderful, wonderful guest with us today. And good afternoon to you, Bob. Pleased to see that you got through the London traffic okay. Bob's joining us from London, where he's been having discussions on sustainable development with, among others, the Prince of Wales, the Chancellor, and the Minister for International Development. But we're greatly privileged, and I do mean greatly privileged today, to have the Mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, join us on Urban Sector Day. Mr. Mayor, you have an audience which contains many urban sector specialists from around the world. Their numbers are a testimony to the intense interest among them in your work in New York City, which is truly path-breaking, and to your enormous influence as a leader. Thank you for finding the time to be with us. We know you have a hectic schedule. It truly is a great honor to have you here, and there's huge interest in your presentation. Bob would love to have been here in person, but is standing by in London, and he will make the words of introduction. So over to you, Bob.
Well, thank you very much, Graham. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to welcome Mayor Bloomberg. I had the pleasure of getting to know the mayor a little bit when I worked in New York City. He's an impressive and versatile leader. He has a strategic sense that focuses on the most important elements of a topic. The executive sense of going after the key facts in information, and one of the nicest qualities, a sheer enjoyment of the politics of governing, as well as a good sense of humor. And all of them, in my experience, have been combined with one other quality that is particularly appreciative, and that's a very strong commitment to public service. He cares a great deal about his community, and he wants to make it a better place for the citizens of New York. Now, it turns out that the World Bank Group's experience with Mayor Bloomberg runs considerably deeper than my own, because I learned from our Treasurer's office that they started buying the Bloomberg terminals in 1986, which I think was very early in the development of what became an incredibly successful business venture. Our Treasurer's office believes that this innovation contributed tremendously to market efficiency, breaking the near monopoly that the dealers had not only on information but on speedy analytics. So his innovation is one that has cut spreads and new issue transaction costs to extraordinary effect. The mayor has brought that same spirit of innovation and entrepreneurialism to his work in New York City, and in doing so, he's also shown that ideas can move in multiple directions among countries. The mayor has a tremendous international spirit, just like that of his city, New York City. And one particular example is his Opportunity New York City program is a CCC project, conditional cash transfer project, that drew from some of the experiences of Brazil and Mexico's successful anti-poverty programs. As I think everyone in the audience knows, these conditional cash transfer programs are based on modest cash transfers that are targeted to the poorest, in exchange for sending kids to school or libraries or some basic preventive health and nutrition measures. And I understand the mayor visited Mexico himself to get a better sense of this program. The World Bank as an institution, Mr. Mayor, is now supporting 16 conditional cash transfer programs in 12 countries, and I was delighted to learn that our staff offered some advice as you were developing the New York City program, funding it with foundations and some of your own generosity. And now the mayor is leading the world in trying to integrate the challenges of urban areas and cities with that of global climate change. So we're most fortunate that the mayor will give his keynote speech for us on Urban Sector Day. Mr. Mayor, you probably have learned we have staff from all over the world as part of our Sustainable Development Network. And with more than half of the world's population now in cities, with more than 90% of urban growth now taking place in developing countries, with some 1 billion people that are now living in urban slums in developing countries without clean water or proper sanitation or adequate housing, but also with the urban share of GDP over 60% in most developing countries, we couldn't have asked for a better and more experienced and more thoughtful speaker. So I apologize for not being there personally, but it's an honor to have an opportunity to welcome Mayor Bloomberg of New York City to the World Bank. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Bob, thank you for those kind words from London. I hope the traffic there isn't too bad. You were almost too late to introduce me. You should tell them they should put a congestion pricing charge in. Maybe that would help. And in terms of the World Bank having Bloomberg terminals, my daughters say thank you. Now, my connections with the World Bank are not just through selling Bloomberg terminals. I actually know not only Bob, but both of his two predecessors. You should know that in the interest of full disclosure, my girlfriend works for Jim Wolfenson. She'll be pleased. Jim and I were partners together at Salomon Brothers, and we're both pushed out at exactly the same time. Our careers did okay afterwards, thank you, so there's nothing wrong with that. Paul Wolfenson was a dean at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins, where I was chairman of the board. So you can say that he used to work for me, and I'm guessing that a few of you probably think that he should have stayed there. But I thought that would have gotten a little bit better laugh than that, actually. And Bob was a partner in an investment banking firm that offered me my first job when I got out of business school, and I turned them down, thank goodness. Anyways, it's amazing after all of that you still invited me to speak. Nevertheless, seriously, I am deeply honored by this invitation to address the World Bank's Bank Group's urban sector. The work you do in so many rapidly growing cities really does put you at the center of the stage of the world's most important drama. You truly are at the center of a changing world. This year, for the first time in human history, city dwellers will begin to make up the majority of the Earth's population. And this global urbanization represents a seismic shift in world affairs, and it's happening really at a breathtaking pace. 50 years ago, fewer than 100 of the world's cities had populations of 1 million or more. Within 10 years, nearly 500 will. We now have to deal with the forces of globalization and climate change. And simultaneously, we must confront the challenges of providing all of our people with the health and social services they need to create better lives for their families. And as citizens of the world, our duties certainly are great, but so are the opportunities, I think, for building a more secure and prosperous world for everyone. A world where anything that can be imagined can be accomplished, where ending illiteracy or hunger or stopping AIDS or cleaning the air or deterring corruption are things that really are within our control. I think people are afraid to confront the important issues of our time. They're afraid to confront the complicated issues of our time. If there isn't a simple solution, they don't want to get near it. But the truth of the matter is, there are no simple solutions to complex problems. Nevertheless, we as individuals have a responsibility to do so and to do what I think is important. We want to share the great American dream with the rest of the world. And I think it is a dream that embodies the aspirations of people all around the globe. We have a responsibility, and I think America, you will find, will stand up and do its part. Now, some people doubt that the world's great cities are up to the tasks before us, but I do not. Time after time, cities have shown an ability to overcome even the most daunting obstacles and to mobilize and maximize the talents of our people. Today, I would like to use the transformation of New York City as a small example of what I think can be done. And God knows that you in this room and your colleagues around the world are truly trying to face infinitely more serious problems of people who are just trying to stay alive. But nevertheless, what New York City has done perhaps can be used elsewhere, and we would be proud if anybody would take our ideas and plagiarize them and improve them and send them back to us, even better. We have no not invented here problem. We are a city, a global city, and the great strength of New York is that we have taken ideas from every place. If you go back to 9/11, many people thought that New York's days of greatness were numbered. There were serious predictions that businesses and residents would flee the city wholesale, that our economy would never recover, that crime would once again take root in our city, and that New York was headed for an irreversible downward spiral of decline. I don't know if that sounds familiar, but it should, because I bet that all of you have heard the naysayers and cynics say exactly the same thing and disparage the work of the World Bank and say that you won't succeed, that you can't succeed. We heard exactly the same thing: doubt, defeatism, hopelessness, negativism. But I think we've shown, and you have shown, that we can address these problems. And in New York in the last 6 years, New York City certainly has proved the naysayers wrong, and I think you are doing exactly the same thing. How did we do it? Well, there's no one answer, of course, no royal road to success. But I believe there are 4 values which have helped transform New York City and which provide lessons for the rest of the world, lessons that are universal and transferable. And they are harnessing the force of immigration and globalization, tapping the power of innovation, instituting rigorous and accountable governance, and having the independence to take on entrenched interests when they stand in the way of progress. And let me expand on each of these values, beginning with the long-term and continued embrace of immigration and globalization. If you want to know what I think is the single biggest difference between New York and other cities that have never recovered from the job losses of the 1970s in America, I have one word for you: immigrants. Over the past 30 years, our immigrant population in New York has more than doubled in size. Today, 37% of New Yorkers, more than 3 million people, are foreign-born, and more than 70% of them have come to New York since 1980. Their ambition, hard work, and entrepreneurial drive continues to bring dynamic new life to our economy and a fresh new spirit to our city. New Yorkers understand that. Even after 9/11, when it would have been understandable for us to become fearful about the rest of the world, we have continued to welcome immigrants in New York City at a historic-making pace, and they have more than repaid us. Just as important as this global movement of people is the increasing crucial role that global capital plays in New York's economy. We finance development around the world, and you see today other countries are doing the same thing in New York, international and multi-directional. The power of globalization played a big part in reviving New York's fortunes over the past 30 years and in preventing us from going into a downward spiral after 9/11. And our success story is far from being a one-off anomaly in this world. Just take a look at what India and China have achieved as they have become urbanized and more fully reintegrated into the global economy. What this tells us is that the world's cities emphatically do not need the restrictive new barriers to immigration or trade that many political leaders want to erect, especially here in the United States. The cities that hope to succeed in the 21st century cannot close their doors to the world's workers any more than they can close their doors to the world's capital or to the world's ideas. In New York, the free global movement of labor, capital, and ideas defines our character, underlies our prosperity, and explains our comeback. Sadly, some of our national leaders are turning their backs on this formula for success. And if they insist on turning away the best and the brightest and protecting jobs instead of promoting them, then I'm sorry, but I think the hard economic times that we are beginning to experience in the United States will be with us for a very long time. But the choice is ours, and every country faces exactly the same choice. Do we reap the benefits of globalization and address its difficulties honestly, or do we scapegoat globalism and turn away its benefits? I believe we should be working to bring the benefits of globalization not only to the United States, but to cities around the world where too many people remain isolated and impoverished, and something that the World Bank's lending policies certainly can help achieve. One of the benefits of globalization is the ever-freer movement of ideas, a trend that reinforces the second value I want to stress, the power of innovation. There are so many educated, creative, brilliant minds in our world today, capable of creating innovative solutions to many, if not all, of the problems that plague us. We must foster this spirit of innovation and reinforce it in every way we can. New York and other cities, too, understand this. We are increasingly adopting one another's innovative approaches to our shared challenges, and this is especially true in two areas: reducing poverty and global climate change. In the U.S., we've been fighting poverty with pretty much the same arsenal of weapons for the past 40 years. And guess what? Not much has changed. And that's why innovation that promises to break this cycle of futility is so crucial. And so far, there's been precious little talk of innovation at the national level, in our government or in our current political campaigns. But the world's cities, including New York, aren't waiting for others to act first. Countries around the world, especially in the developing world, are experimenting with anti-poverty programs that smash taboos and turn orthodoxies on their heads, and some of them have been very promising results. And as Bob said in his introduction, New York has recently become the first U.S. city to adopt, on a trial basis, the kind of conditional cash transfers that have been successful in Mexico, Turkey, Brazil, and other developing nations. And I'm pleased to read the other day that Prime Minister Brown of Great Britain is now proposing a similar program for the United Kingdom. By offering conditional cash payments that can amount to up to 1/3 of household income, we hope to encourage low-income New Yorkers to stay in school, stay in their jobs, and stay on track to rise out of poverty. And for those that are skeptical, let me just point out that in the developed world, we use economic incentives for the rich and for companies to get them to do things that we think are in their interest and in society's interest. Using the same thing at the other end of the economic spectrum only makes common sense. It's worked in some places, and I have great hopes that it will work in New York City. Nearly 5,000 families are already enrolled in what we call Opportunity NYC. This program is currently privately funded, and if it becomes the success we hope it will, then we will invest public dollars in it. And that's another thing. Some of these programs require innovative solutions and independent sources of funds like the World Bank or private philanthropy to do the untested things. But that's what innovation really is all about. Innovation is about not knowing whether it will work, what it's going to look like, who will buy it, what color it'll be, how much it costs to manufacture. But if we don't have innovation, the society cannot continue to grow. The World Bank really has long been a leader in supporting conditional cash transfers, and I did want to thank its staff for working with us, as Bob talked out, in helping us design our Opportunity NYC, and that includes, in particular, Laura Rawlings of the bank's Caribbean and Latin American Regional Office. New York and other cities are also sharing innovative ideas about addressing an equally critical issue, climate change. Indeed, in many instances, cities are well out in front of their national governments in this area as well. For example, here in the United States, even though our national government has not ratified the Kyoto Accord, more than 700 American cities, including New York City, have pledged to meet its standards. And in the past year, I've met and talked with mayors of the world's great cities from London to Mexico to Beijing,